Welcome back to 8 Cubes. I'm KMBest, he's Lamby series. We are going to talk about the 8 most important topics in Marvel Snap. We're starting with the card that is coming out on Tuesday, Infinity Ultron, a 5/6 that adds 2 of Ultron's Infinity Stones to your hand. These stones do all types of stuff. I will say the one I am excited for is there is a stone that doubles Ultron's power and then a stone that makes a drone and sets it to Ultron's power. However, in order to get both of those stones at the same time, I'm either going to need like a Wong or I'm going to need to win a 1 in 6 followed by a 1 in 5. How do you feel about this card's existence? Do you think it's going to live up to its predecessors, Thanos, Agamotto, things like that? Where are you at on this, Lamby?
Yeah, so in terms of just card design, I really like this style of cards, right? Like 5/6, a bit understated, but it's fine because it generates two like supposedly powerful cards for you to use on your final turn. Have to know that the stones cost 3. So obviously,
Indeed.
even if we get 2 perfect stones, they use up your entire turn 6, right? But like I guess there's a good reason why it costs 3. Because I was thinking initially, like if these were actually in Infinity Stones and they cost like 1, they'll be super busted. So it's a good thing that they don't. But yeah, I agree with KM in that I like the combination of the 2 stones in like it doubles the power of the Ultron and then you make a copy with the drone. But I think one other one that I think could be really good is also the ongoing one that doubles your on reveals, right? That one
Mm-hmm.
I think is actually also pretty strong. But obviously the problem with this card is that it's a 5 cost, which means whatever stone you get on turn 6, you're kind of priced in to be like, all right, these are the stones I get on turn 6. I need to use them if they are good enough. If they are not good enough, then I just wasted turn 5, right? Because playing a 5/6 is not good, and then if you get bad stones, it's way worse. It compounds. So I feel like Ultron is like a big risk to put down on turn 5. Which also means that like if you are playing RHM, you can put it down on turn 4, and then
Sure.
like you have more decision room, and then obviously the card that doubles on reveals you will have one more turn to shine, you know. So yeah, I think this card is gonna be a fun card. I don't think it's gonna be a good card, you know. Like I don't think you can realistically say I'm gonna make an Ultron Infinity Ultron deck and be like tier 1, because it's firstly too random and like the payoff comes very late, you know. It's not Infinity Stones, it's, I would say, scuffed Infinity Stones, honestly.
It's a very interesting card. What strikes me about it, though, is every time I see people talking about it, it's about how will I go out of my way to make this card come
Hmm.
down earlier, and how will I go out of my way to make the stones cost less. Stuff like Luna Snow into Sarah, allowing you to play Ultron, allowing you to play a bunch of other stuff. Like, I think a Surfer deck could do that. If this
Yeah.
card ends up being actually good, though, I think the major reason that will be is because of the ways it increases your range. The larger the amount of possibilities that your opponent has to think about, the more likely they are to just do the incorrect thing based on what you could be doing rather than what you are doing. So, something like a Surfer deck going Luna Snow, Sarah, and this, I think that that is the kind of thing where like that actually is a genuine use case. Something like an RSM deck probably could use this. I find it hard to believe that it couldn't. But I do think that in terms of Luna Snow decks, I think she's going to end up kind of similar, or not Luna Snow, of course, Infinity Ultron decks. I think it's going to end up kind of similar to Isan, where ultimately a lot of the conversation is going to be about how do I make this happen a turn earlier than the number on the
Right.
card is what it says it should actually be happening on.
Yeah, I think just want to add one more thing to what you mentioned, which I agree, and also at the same time, I think it's also this card's downfall, which is we talked about increasing your range, right? Just having more stuff for your opponents to play around. The problem with this card, and I think the biggest problem is like the cost of increasing, like the opportunity cost of the increasing your range with this card is so huge because you're playing a 5 mana 5/6,
Mm-hmm.
and which may or may not give you relevant results with the stones, you know. So like if this card had absurd like points, like if it was like arrow stats or maybe one less than an arrow, like a 5 whatever, like just a bit bigger, I can see myself like just risking it, you know. But like I wouldn't want to risk low rolling and playing this understated guy. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a bit iffy on this one. Like honestly, it's really just cause this card's a bit too expensive and the stats are a bit low. That's why I'm a bit iffy.
I think at 5/8, this becomes a pretty easy card to try free rolling. Like
Correct.
5/8 or 5/9, this is suddenly like, yeah, I might as well, right? Like I might as well just play this. It's like pretty decent and it'll do some cool stuff. at 5-6, you need to get the payoff for this card to be worth putting in your deck. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to happen. Like I'm not one to look at a card and be like, this is a buff candidate or whatever, but I kind of wonder if this guy kind of is, where it's like, there's a world in which this card released and it was like the new card everyone complained about because it was in every deck. And I'm glad that they avoided that and they made it a card that people have to build around, so they make Infinity Ultron decks now. I think that's probably a smart thing to do. But I do think that it could bode poorly for this card's power. Next up is Kahhori, who I think is honestly like a pretty decent card. I think people expected her to be something more than she was, but on this show we were very clear. This is a card that is either a Gwenpool upgrade or a Gwenpool side grade. Definitely ended up being more of a side grade, so where we thought this card could be like an 8 out of 10, it probably comes in at like a 7 out of 10 instead, because it's more like Gwenpool for big hand decks, which typically don't want to play Gwenpool because they have such large hands that hitting random cards in it, they're much less likely to actually play those cards. But Kahhori has been very solid for me in Victoria hand decks, very solid for me in Thanos decks. If you're doing stuff that puts cards in your hand and you are unable to play Gwenpool, she is definitely a card that exists and has a reasonable actual spot in games. Like, this is a card that is good and you will see people playing it. I don't think it's like the greatest card of all time, but this is like a solid 7 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, I did a lot of thinking about this card because okay, so I think I can establish and I can feel like this is still like not gonna be as good as Galacta. Galacta is still the better card. But when it comes
That
to like the
was-
whole Gwen, yeah, definitely 100%. But like Gwenpool Kahhori comparison, to me is actually really, really very close because the we talked about this in the previous video. The thing is, Kahhori is way more flexible. Like the ability to just make her useful on turn 6. Like she's such a power spike on turn 6, and obviously you don't always have to only play her on turn 6. You could play her early on 4 and then make like better decisions and stuff like that. But like the ability for her to be able to be played and useful on turn 6, and Gwenpool is 100% not, it's like it just gives me like a lot of thought. Like I just keep thinking like, would I want the flexibility of Kahhori over like maybe Gwenpool being sometimes just the easily more splashable card? Yeah, that's where my head is at. So I think like you said, 7 out of 10 should be a good rating for this card. I think it's something that's worth buying for sure. I do believe that the card is actually quite powerful actually.
I feel like it might not be worth buying, but a lot of that is because of the move into the new system and the ways in which caches have to be evaluated in the context of like, this could be 3,000 tokens under a new system. So if you spend 2 keys on Kahhori, you better not have any other card in the entire game that you want more than her. And so for a 7 out of 10, I do think that is probably a skip from me, just given the context of the new system. But it is entirely down to the fact that if you roll 2 keys, that could have been any card in the game, and I do not think there are going to be many people for whom Kahhori is their number 1 most wanted card in Marvel Snap. And so that's like the 7 out of 10, it's a good rating, but I think given that context, probably ends up being a negative one. It's probably time to start discussing Scream nerfs. This is a card that just sort of fundamentally has a level of scaling that no other card at its cost approaches. It is very simply the best scaler at 2 cost. It is a deck or a card that enables a very unique type of deck, and I think that's probably a good thing. Like, on the whole, I'm more happy if there are differentiators between mid-range decks, like, oh, I'm a Scream deck, as opposed to everything being like Agamotto, Shang-Chi, soup, right? It does meaningfully matter to me that this card is different from that. But I do think at this point we are really coming up along the edge of like, this is just a little bit too strong. No, the +4 scaling maybe a little bit too good.
Yeah, what nerfs do you think we could possibly consider to have the card still playable, but definitely not at its current power level?
I think it'd be pretty easy to take a point off. Like, that's one of these cards where it's like just free, right? You make it a 2/1, it is worse into things like Red Guardian, more obviously the thing that gets hit by Red Guardian, and you make it like you're playing a tempo deck that you're now playing like really actively bad stuff. 2/2 is a very bad stat line already. Scream being able to survive being a 2/2 does not make me overly confident that putting her to 2/1 is going to be the greatest thing in the world, but I really can't think of anything else that keeps her alive, and I really am interested in keeping her alive because I do think it's nice that these decks have a different texture.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Scream at 2/2 is that obviously it's understated, but her scaling, right? It's like if you gave us old Angela at 2/3 initially, it's also super busted, right? So like cards that scale, I think it very easily can start lower than the average good 2 drop, you know. So I think that's fine. So another thing I realized is that, like, do you realize that, like, maybe about a few months ago when we did the first Scream review, we were like trying to figure out a way that this card was actually good, and then they like buffed stuff, and then like now we are trying to figure out a way for this to actually be less good. Like look how far we've come. But yeah, no, I think this card in general is just I wouldn't say collector, I wouldn't say Angela or whatever specifically, but I feel like this type of card really needs to be managed well, right? Because it's like the early game card that just like it's so cheap to play because it's only 2, and then like it snowballs out of control so quickly, especially when there's like a way to build around. And I think Scream decks like it's so easy to build around right now. So I think like yeah, gotta go. 2/1 seems about right.
When I think about who I would compare her to in terms of scaling 2-drops, it's actually like Morbius and Thena. That's a 2/1 and a
Like
2/0. And it's like, okay, well, maybe we should think about giving her one of those stat lines. Maybe 2/0 her at some point too, because this is a card that is getting pretty massive payoff for a very low opportunity cost. You trigger her one time and she's great on rate. And it's like, I feel like maybe you should start her a bit lower if that's the move.
Dude, I mean, honestly, now that you mentioned Morbius, I think let's just give her the 2/0 and see what happens. See what happens after the 2. Like, if she's still busted after the 2/0, then we might have a real problem.
Then what do? Do you just like Angela her, where you're just like, you used to say +2, but now you're gonna say +1 and be a 2/3.
Then after you Angela her, you need to give her the stats back, you know, and then we see again.
you just like what they'll do is they'll 2/3 +1 her, and then in 6 months it'll be like, let's see if we can go back to the old screen. I just opened a God Split Sam Wilson gold background with a rainbow Kirby crackle. So that to me indicates that Sam Wilson is about to eat a meteor to the face in the next OTA. Like he is done. They are going to obliterate him off the face of the earth. Hypothetical. Let's say you wanted to obliterate Sam Wilson off the face of the earth. You didn't want him to become unplayable, but you wanted him to become like less than 5% play rate. What would you do to Sam Wilson?
Less than 5% is...
Less than 5%. Wow. Yes.
Okay, we gotta... Okay, so firstly, I don't think they will change what the shield is, which is like spawned at the start of the game, right? I think that mechanic needs to stay. If not, like I think that mechanic needs to stay. The card just completely becomes unplayable. I think we actually dropped the stats of Sam Wilson, the card. We dropped the stats to something like 2/1. You will feel it. You drop the stats of Sam Wilson himself to 2/1 and you'll feel it. Because I feel like if you change the fact that the shield starts at the beginning of the game, right, you just literally obliterate and change the whole card. It literally becomes a new card, right? And if the shield doesn't start at the beginning of the game. So I feel like to drop the win play rate of these cards a lot, you do want to keep the fact that the shield spawns at the start of the game. That's like a unique flavor of the card. But you drop Sam's power way down. By way down, I mean like 2/1. You drop his power way down, and then there's an actual downside to actually physically playing the card right now.
Yeah, I think that is there's like a 1A and 1B on the list of things I would do to Sam Wilson. 2/1 is one of them. The other one is +1 scaling. And I very much agree with not touching the shield. A lot of people are like, oh, you should make the shield 0/0. I think that is really bad because what you don't want to do with this card is make the one thing that makes it unique, the shield, that shows up on the board.
It's like the reason you play the card, because you get a free one guy on the board.
Into a downside. Like, that would be so bad. If the one thing that is guaranteed to happen in every game is bad for you, you have a rock on the board unless you draw this card.
It's a rock. It's literally
I am violently against that idea because of the guaranteed nature of it. I think that would be just a very bad idea in terms of game design. What I don't think is crucial to Sam Wilson's identity is that he's also Angela for some reason. Like, there's no reason for this card to be this
He's basically
big.
an average 2-drop stat line with way busted levels of effect, right?
Like, why is he also Angela? And it's like, okay, that is not integral to the identity of this character. I've come up with a couple of solutions, like maybe it gives Sam +1 and other caps +2. I don't know. I like the part where it gives the other caps +2. I don't like the part where it gives Sam +2.
The other caps are not even being played, so maybe that's fine.
Yes, like I like that part of Sam Wilson is that he hooks into the other Captain America. Another pitch I had is like, okay, what if instead of making Sam bigger, we took some power off of Sam and the shield gets one bigger and Sam gets one bigger. So like you do like 2-2 or 2-1 Sam, but the power is now split between the shield and Sam, which maybe that's better, but it also means that you lean more into like, there's not one guy here making up for all the stuff. And it's also like this shield, now you have to think about the positioning of it on the final turn in a meaningful way. A lot of my more fun games with Sam have been when I could get some power on the shield, and like that feels like a reasonable direction to go. So like 2-2, split the power between Sam and shield. I'd be into that. I think that's pretty cool. I would like to complain about internet people in this topic. The first reactions I saw to the OTA were, I can't believe they didn't nerf Bullseye. And I feel as though people have discard derangement syndrome. And I want to be clear, I fully understand I have hella derangement syndrome. But a lot of that is down to how the deck feels to play and what the effects it has on the metagame are. I think we can conclusively say that discard, while good, does not have the same level of absolute crushing of mid-range decks and variety of strategies that Hela had. It has a smaller version of that impact. That is the dynamic it's tapping into, where it is a deck that is there to bully decks that are playing fair. You're playing fair, you're an idiot. I'm going to go over the top of you. The downside to discard is that, unlike Hela, the ways to interact with it are on the board. Their Dakin is sitting right there for you to Winds of Watum. Their Morbius is sitting right there for you to Enchantress. All of that stuff is sitting on the board. And so that means that it is a deck that gets worse as your opponents get better and are more willing to either A, interact with you, or B, leave the game. And I think this is a large part of why people don't like discard. And as a Hela hater, I am sympathetic. But the question I put to you is, what level of an unfair deck that bullies fair decks is okay? Because I think maybe they could make discards slightly more easily able to be interacted with, but short of literally being destroy, where every single tech card in the entire game works against it in some way, I don't know how you make a combo deck that is close to playable that has the ability to be interacted with in this way any more than discard does.
Yeah, you brought up destroy, which literally like just sparked an idea in my head. And like the thought is, the thing about destroy is that you shouldn't make combo decks worse than destroy. Like the thing about destroy is that it's already the most fragile quote unquote combo deck ever. Firstly, everything counters it and everything needs to work in a particular way, and you need to draw stuff on like particular turns. If not, like your late game doesn't exist. You know, everything needs to be perfect. And I think firstly, we shouldn't do any deck. We shouldn't make any deck succumb to the fact that it has to draw perfectly and it has to do things in a very perfect order. If not, I mean, it's probably gonna be a bad deck if you do that. But the thing about the Bullseye deck is one thing you mentioned very strongly is that firstly, similarly to Hela, it gives people the very fused bad thing whereby like they know that they're gonna die, they should leave. But the funny thing is also then you should leave. But like the thing is, if you know that you should leave and it's you can mentally tell yourself it's okay to leave, then you won't feel so bad. But I know people don't like that. But at the same time, this is not Hela because like everything that kills you is on the board, right? Everything that kills you is there. The Dakin is there, the Morbius is there. So basically everything is just there for you to see. You know that if you have the tech cards, you can win. The problem is really back to the fact that you don't want to leave. Even if it's so obvious in your face you are dead, you don't want to leave. That is a ongoing problem that I mean it does feel bad, but like honestly, once you just If you just accept that like you're just gonna lose one cube to this discard Bullseye deck, then it's fine. The deck is fine. I actually think you shouldn't change anything in this deck, by the way. Like don't nerf Bullseye, don't nerf whatsoever. Because I think this deck is not busted. I don't think it's busted. I just think it's just there. It's just like it's just there to get
Good.
points and
Yeah.
like get more points than mid-range decks sometimes, but that's it. That's it. It's not busted. I really don't think it's busted.
Everyone knows that I play a lot of mid-range decks and that I like playing
Yeah.
mid-range mirrors, but like I'm going to be real with you. If we're putting on like a game designer hat for a second, your game can't be entirely that. There has to be
Yeah,
some
it can,
combo
yeah.
stuff in the metagame. And discard right now is that combo stuff. And I think it's about as interactable as any combo deck can be without being turbo S. Like I cannot come up with a more interactable combo deck because it's not just one card that interacts with it. I've won games Killmongering a Meek. I've won games Enchantressing a Morbius. I've won games Red Guardianing a Collector. I've won games Lady Deathstriking a Bullseye. There's a bunch of stuff, and none of it immediately wins you the game. And I do think that there is something to that, where it's like, people really prefer like, oh, I'm playing against Mr. Negative. I'm just put my Mobius in there, and now I don't have to worry about that matchup at all. Discard doesn't have any one-size-fits-all solutions, but there's a lot of small stuff that moves the needle. And I think that maybe that dynamic is not something that players appreciate. Like maybe they just don't like it.
But okay, so that last one was quite interesting. It's like every deck just has natural ways to beat the stuff that this discard deck does, right? But like people, I guess people don't see because it feels like there's no like, I just put Enchantress and I win this card. But if you think about it, right, your deck kind of naturally has outs to a lot of the things this card does anyway. You just don't think you are winning because you don't have a one Enchantress for it. You just don't think so. But like you said, right, Killmongering a Meek feels so like, that's not how you beat this card. But if you do Killmonger a Meek, it does something, you know?
Yeah. It's not how you beat discard, but it is how I have beaten discard.
Which is a lot of different ways you can do it, right? Exactly.
Yes. Like, it's not like there's no one-size-fits-all solution for the deck, but that's because there's a lot of stuff that's like a pretty reasonable thing to be doing. Like, if you put Killmonger in your deck thinking the primary use of it is to beat Meek, that's not the primary use of it, and that's not what you should be doing. But it can happen, and it has.
Yes.
Another immediate reaction I saw to this OTA and last OTA, and frankly, it's kind of been a while since I haven't seen this reaction, is, oh man, this is mid, and it doesn't do anything. And I wanted to kind of talk about that dynamic because I do think that we've hit a point where, like, the metagame has been fairly similar with, you know, like, there's been some big differences, right? I'm not going to sit here and understate it, right? Thanos is back. Arashem's viability varies widely week to week. We've had V-hand decks come in and out. We've had a whole bunch of stuff that, like, things have changed. But fundamentally, like, Agamotto was everywhere, and now he's kind of not, right? Like, there has been a pretty clear through line, though, of, like, Sam Wilson, Shang-Chi Juggernaut decks. Those have been good for forever. Scream decks and Bullseye decks, basically since January, those have been a large part of the metagame. And so I think what's happening in part is people are just looking at these patches and they're not addressing those cards. And they're just like, well, if they're not doing that, this patch has to suck. There's just no way because nothing big is going to change. What do you think about the role of OTAs in balance and whether or not they should be big swings aimed at changing the metagame dramatically?
So this is very interesting, and also like my opinion on this might not be correct because I'm not a game designer, but I've noticed this very often. Marvel Snap does a lot of spray and pray patches. Like they do a lot of like, okay, so let's put aside like the meta defining cards that they didn't touch first, right? Because I guess they don't want to like they don't want to. I think they don't want to just like straight up just nerf every good card in existence. Like every time a card is good, alright, it's definitely gonna get nerfed. I think having this expectation of design team is like they don't want that. They don't want basically the player base to be like, alright, this card is good, it's gonna get nerfed. This card is good, it's gonna get nerfed. I think they don't want that. So what they do is that they try to buff random things, and by spray and pray that I mentioned earlier, it's just that they buff a lot of random things. Like you look at the latest patch, right? You look at the latest patch, like they gave power to Dino, they gave power to Bishop, they gave power to Patriot. Like honestly, I don't think this power does anything at all. Like I really don't think like buffing little things here and there does much. But I guess that's why I say that I'm not a game designer because I might be wrong here. But it just feels like instead of like nerfing specific like power cards in the game. They decide to buff random things to see if it helps change the meta whatsoever. I mean, obviously this time I look at the stuff they buff, I don't think it changes anything. But like, yeah, that's just my opinion. I feel like not every single OTA and patch has to be like I need to get rid of a deck. You know, I think people have this opinion whereby like if there's an OTA, it means my best deck is they're gonna get rid of the best deck and I can finally play something else. It doesn't always have to be that, you know. It doesn't always have to be like just because an OTA or patch is coming, they need to remove like the most powerful deck so I can do something else. It could be just they want to buff other things to see if like there will be an introduction of new decks into the game without removing an existing deck. You know, it could be like that sometimes.
Something I think is likely related is the general failures of a lot of recently released cards to catch on in the metagame. And this is sort of not necessarily a double-edged sword, but it's also tied into another issue that we discussed, which is like when you have these cards like Sam Wilson and Scream in the game. These are like 1 in 6 months. One card every 6 months is going to be this good. Yeah. Like, it's just not a very common thing. Maybe like 1 in 3 months, you get like a Sam Wilson, a Scream, a Bullseye, just a thing that is that good and brings an archetype together that well. They're not incredibly common, and they shouldn't be, because the more of them you make, you start having to ask the question, how do we make a card better than Scream for whatever archetype we're doing it for? And it's like, oh man, that's really hard, and then you get really far into power creep. So, I think one of the big reasons people have been looking for OTAs to change the metagame is that the cards haven't been doing it. This is not, like, no one is playing Firehair right now, right? Like, when you look at, like, cards that you still see people playing for the last 4 months, you get Victoria Hand, you get Sam Wilson, you get Iron Patriot, you get Moonstone, you get Bullseye. A lot of those cards were January. Nobody's playing Isan. There are occasional Khonshu gamers. I doubt they're going to be around as much after the nerf to MODOK. Like, what is going to be changing from these cards releasing? Because that's what should be changing the metagame. And I think that, like, as the design team gets maybe a little bit less power creepy, it does have the effect of making the metagame feel stale, because, like, if you're not explicitly pushing the power of these cards, they're not going to be better than the cards that already exist. And we went through a period of Marvel Snap where I think we can all agree was like pretty power creepy. We had like Agent Venom, Surtur, Galacta, we had Scream, we had Anti-Venom, we had all these cards that are like, wow, these are amazing cards, but now those cards are what new cards have to compete with. And that's hard.
Yeah, so I think that era period or whatever you want to call it, I was actually thinking about it before you like mentioned it to begin with, but really there was like what 6 month period where every card was just like too difficult to not pick up, you know. And then now we are back to this phase of whereby like every card is like possible to just not buy, you know. Like even when I mentioned earlier up above about Kahhori being like a pickup, like can you imagine like comparing Kahhori to the Agent Venom period? Like you can't. The Agent Venom period of cards is just way too power creepy and too strong, right? So I think maybe we've just like mentally gotten a bit used to the fact that if you've been in that era whereby every card was kind of a pickup, now you're just like, I think these cards are not good enough. But honestly, it's just because that era was just like every card you kind of have to buy to be relevant in the meta. I prefer now, like you don't have to strictly buy every card to like succeed in the meta, you know, because like now it's not the case. Now you can skip quite a few things and still be completely fine, right? So I think it's just a matter of getting used to this. And personally, I don't know the correct answer, whether that was better or this is better. But I think I prefer this. I prefer that I don't have to strictly just pick up every card every week to compete and stay relevant. But obviously, then people, like you said, right, people will be complaining like, there's no new shake-up because the cards don't do the shake-up. But then there will be that group of people that remember the time of like, remember Agent Venom where every week I have to spend 6,000. If not, I couldn't compete. So can't make everybody happy.
I do think that it's also possible that these things are related. Like, what if the balance team was like, man, we made a lot of really strong cards. Let's be a little more careful. Like,
I think you are right. I think it's related for sure.
Like, that's entirely possible as well. Like, what if we need to, like, be careful and see what happens, right? Like, what if we shouldn't be pushing these cards as much as we have been? What if we made a mistake and we're trying to make up for that? And it's interesting to sort of watch that because I don't know, like, what would you, the audience, prefer? Like, vast power creep, but a guarantee that the meta is going to change because the new cards are strong as hell? Or this? Is this better or was that better? My gut says that people will respond that this was better, but like sales metrics will indicate that that was better.
Yes.
Just wanted to give a little shout out to Thanos because he's just been crushing it lately. Like, this is just a good card again. It happened. It's finally happened. We crossed the tipping point. I was like, Gorgon will mean Thanos will never be good again. Wrong. Idiot. Do not listen to this man. Absolutely wrong. Thanos is goated. He's just great. Like, I don't know when it happened. Like, the ongoing overlap certainly helps, but even normal Thanos is just good now, and he is eating Arashem's lunch in terms of big decks. Just Arashem is like not disappeared, but like way more Thanos than Arashem now.
Do you think it's like also just cause? Okay, so this one is just me being a bit devil's advocate here, but like I know Thanos is relevant again, but do you think it's like relevant and people are just pushing it a bit more because like they've wanted to play good Thanos for a long time? Like, don't get me wrong, I do think Thanos is better now. Like, I think the Goliath Spectrum thing made a big deal, right? Like, gave people an easy way to just put points and an easy way to just play like quote unquote best version Thanos right now. You know, that's pretty good. But do you think it's a bit like people are just pushing Thanos very hard because like there's a playable version and then they just stop like innovating with other things because this playable version of Thanos is something they wanted for a very long time?
Here's what I'll tell you. Normally, when you sort decks by win rate on Untapped, the top decks have a sample size that is very close to whatever your minimum games played is. And this should be like fairly obvious to anyone who understands how these stats work, but like, yeah, it's a lot easier for you to have a 60% win rate or whatever in 200 games than it is in 500 games.
Correct.
Thanos Ongoing is top 3 in win rate, top 10% over 200 games played, and it has 670 games played. It's pushing 60. Like, that is a deck that has a larger sample size than a lot of other decks and is pushing 60% win rate and has a genuinely significant sample size. And then you go look at like the other builds of it, the other builds of Thanos Ongoing, like the one where you cut speed for Captain America. Got about 400 games last time I checked, top 10% infinite, and it has like a 58% win rate. And it's like, yeah, it got a little bit worse, but not really all that much worse. And so you end up with like the picture of a deck that is not just good, but like one of the best decks in the game, kind of out of nowhere, not a month after I said it would never be good again.
Yeah, which is the thing I can't quite figure out, like, why. Like, I honestly don't normally get stuck in this kind of situations where I don't understand why. But I'm trying to figure out why right now. Like, why did Thanos get where? Like, okay, so the biggest thing it got was the Goliath. Was it really just this deck was possible even before Goliath? Just that when with the Goliath introduction, people start to try this direction. Like, was the ongoing direction of Thanos even possible before Goliath? Because the thing is, before Goliath, no one bothered with this. Right, but after Goliath, people bothered to try, and then they realized it's insane. But was it really because the Goliath made it insane, or was it because this was always something you could do, but no one bothered to try?
I think it's both, right? First of all, we were in a heavy Gorgon meta previous to this. Like, Agamotto's fall off has allowed Thanos to rise up, and maybe people will react to that by playing Gorgon, but I don't think Gorgon is as good as some of the other cards into Thanos, like Killmonger, right? So, like, if people start explicitly reacting to it, that's one thing, and maybe they just haven't. I also think that it is gaining equity in a macro sense from the reliance of mid-range decks on Juggernaut and Shang-Chi. Thanos can become immune to to Shang-Chi with the Soul Stone. Very important interaction there. And as a deck that fills up the board, it has some sort of natural Juggernaut immunity. This is, I think, if we're looking at macro dynamics that have benefited Thanos, a general lack of Gorgon relative to the previous, a general large amount of Juggernaut Shang-Chi decks, And also, I think, the number one macro dynamic that has benefited Thanos is that Sam Wilson means Mockingbird is unnerfed, just a 5/9.
Mhm.
Like that's pretty damn good for the deck. So it's just in a really good spot right now, and I am genuinely impressed with it. It is also a very easy to beat deck if you really want to build to beat it. I don't think it's going to stay at the top, but it has stayed there longer than it has already. And I said it would never be good again, so clearly don't listen to me.
Yeah, I mean, this topic, I feel like it's dragging a bit longer than I expected, but I got a lot of things to say, which is because I feel like the thing you mentioned about the whole Juggernaut Shang-Chi immunity thing is kind of like super important, which like a lot of like the good decks right now are just consistent mid-range decks, right? And if like the best thing they do doesn't really affect you, like the whole Juggernaut endgame doesn't really affect you, right? I guess that could be a thing. And I guess the whole Goliath thing just gave people a reason to bother trying to experiment with Thanos. Maybe this whole time Thanos was always good enough to beat the whole mid-range Juggernaut thing, you know? Maybe we could have done it a while back, just that
It's
Goliath gave us a chance to
possible.
try.
It's entirely possible. I will say that before the ongoing build of Thanos, it felt a lot better to play. Like, I'll tell you one dynamic that was specifically killing this deck is when people were playing
Mhm.
Firehair, there was a lot of Killmonger. And that was
Yeah.
just like really, the deck is not good into that. Like, the Firehair meta specifically was pretty bad for it. Like, that's definitely something that like was real. Like the other Thanos deck people were playing, like the Firehair Thanos deck that was terrible. The one thing it was guaranteed to do was beat the hell out of the mirror because of that. And so you had like weirdly little bits of hostility that were just happening. But now that the deck is an ongoing deck, part of it is that I feel like the ongoing version of the deck can just play through Gorgon way more easily. Like it's
Mm.
not reliant on the stones in the same way. Like, yeah, it likes being a stone deck, but it can also just be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, GG. Like, I just have the points to beat whatever it is that you're doing. And because those points are distributed weirdly, even if you're not filling the board, because you're a Spectrum deck, a Sam Wilson deck, all that stuff, you're still kind of good into Juggernaut. Like, you're still able to put points in the Juggernaut lane in a way that is, like, meaningful. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. I've been KMBest. He's been Lamby Series. He'll be back in Marvel Snap big time in May. So make sure you check that out when that happens. And we will see you in the next one after he takes us out.
All right, guys, like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.